Hey guys, how you doing today? As you can see, I'm starting to get a really, really good beard going on here with my little puggers. Hey buddy, how you doing? We're settling on in after we've moved to this new apartment and just closing out our day here, so I thought I'd do a quick recording. Um, my question, the thing that I've been really thinking about over these last few days is what is going on with the Conservative Party? I think the COVID-19 crisis, it has a lot of people asking, well, what are we doing? Like, what's going to change after this? And lots of leftists are certainly hoping that coming out of this crisis, there is going to be actual change, right? I think lots of leftists are looking at this and being like, how do we actually use this moment in order to kind of forward an agenda that actually helps everybody, right? The prevailing narrative for the last 10 years, if not longer, really has been one of abandonment through this sort of fraudulent ideology of individualism. Uh, People say things like, well, it's up to the individual to take care of themselves. And this is really just an excuse to do nothing, and an excuse to abandon people into the crisis that is their life, right? That the society is abandoning them, and so and that's natural and right. The COVID-19 crisis, I think, has revealed the complete farce and the total lie that comes from that. That if you stand on an ideology that says, well, it's up to the individual and everything's fine in the society and so on and so forth, then when crises actually happen, uh, you have to really turn hard to the left uh, quickly in order to actually recover from this complete failure of an ideology that doesn't work and really is designed to plunge people into crises. Um, and so my question really does start to be directed at the Conservative Party, because I wish there was a party in this country that was electable outside of the Liberal Party. I mean, the Conservatives couldn't beat a blackface Justin Trudeau who was offering absolutely nothing last election. I mean, Justin Trudeau really was just standing there saying, I'm Justin Trudeau. And he lost power in that last election. But the Conservatives really hit their cap. And their cap was really Alberta and the Prairie provinces, who were still caught in this obviously fraudulent ideology that doesn't work. And so now the question gets put to the Conservatives, what do you do now? Now that it's very clear that if you just stand for this uh, uh, ideology that is a failure, how can you be considered a legitimate party? Where do you root yourself, and how do you grow and an attempt to actually seize power? Uh, my argument really is that the Conservatives need to re invigorate their politics of when they were red Tories, right? They need to look back into their history and look back into the society and start to ask themselves, well, it's not enough to play this game that and pretend as though every individual is sort of playing through the same rules, and it's no longer enough to pretend as though the society is structured so that everyone can succeed. The reason why the Conservatives lose is because it's so apparent to anyone who lives in any kind of large environment, well, i.e., outside of the prairies, that you need to have social systems. You need to have these sort of social organizations The conservatives are also facing a pretty major problem, which is that they're enormous liars, right? Like, way bigger than the liberals have been, right? The biggest lie I think that the liberals told is that they were interested in electoral reform. And that lie was really one where they did actually take a look at electoral reform, and they saw that it wasn't going to go their way, and so they stopped pursuing it. So it was less a direct lie and more just kind of a lie of convenience. One that said, we're interested in this, but then when they saw that it wasn't going to happen the way they wanted it to happen, they abandoned it. The conservatives just lie. Just take a look at Doug Ford, right? Doug Ford outright lies, like, repeatedly. He's like a serial liar. Kenney is the same. He tells these outrageous lies, like on the electoral trail. I think Doug Ford's largest lie was that he wasn't going to end the basic income program, and then he did it anyway. The day he was elected, he did it. Like, that's not, we looked at the numbers and saw that it wasn't going to work kind of thing. Like, that was an outright black and white lie. And it's just becoming more and more obvious that the Conservative Party exists to serve corporate power exclusively, and that these sort of ideologies that they espouse are just propaganda. And I've really come to notice that it's not really possible to have an intelligent conversation with a conservative because they're so deeply rooted in these overt, absurd propaganda. Like, it's every single time I talk to a conservative, it's inevitable that they will say something insipid like, well, Stalin killed 1 million people, and you're like, it's so childish at this point. And even on this feed, every so often, I get these people pop in and they just say this unintelligible gibberish propaganda nonsense that really is just an embarrassment for them, that they would come forward and admit in the fullness of this conversation that they're completely disinterested in appearing logical or rational, right? If you're standing there and immediately, like, somebody will say something like, well, I think that maybe nationalizing a public service, like, let's say, the internet, nationalizing public service like that is probably a good thing to do. And it has this benefit and that benefit. And then immediately it's like, oh, well, take a look at Venezuela. And you're just like, it's an immediate concession that the person you're talking to, the person who says this kind of thing, is just stupid. There's no other way to say it, right? And if conservative politics and if the Conservative Party is going to embrace this and is going to continuously double down on a type of propaganda or a type of intellectual discussion that is just this insipid, stupid look at the way the world is, then they're going to continuously lose elections, because the electorate here in Canada is interested in caring about one another. They're interested in on the base idea of caring about the people around them instead of this failed ideology of abandonment. And I mean, the propaganda, like the Red Scare propaganda, is not much different than, and I really do see it on this trajectory, the Red Scare propaganda is not that much different than the reefer madness propaganda for the legalization of marijuana. That even as marijuana was being legalized, there were still these ridiculous, absurd voices that were screaming about how it's going to cause the collapse of society while they guzzle a whiskey, drink a coffee, smoke a cigar, and eat a big fat cheeseburger, you know? And it's just like these absolute, like, Archie Bunker sort of stupid individuals who clearly haven't thought anything through, and yet feel that they are on the right side of this conversation. It's pretty staggering to see. And thankfully, the last election really showed this. Canadians are not falling for it. They're not buying into the sort of stupidity of these arguments. And this leaves the Conservative Party in a pretty tough spot because they rely on that. That's their bread and butter, is this sort of idiotic propaganda. That's what they've been using for the last 50 years. And unfortunately, the younger generation that's coming up is intelligent. What with the spread of information with the internet and the spread of, and I mean, our education system is only improving through time. These sort of absurd propaganda pieces that worked in the 1950s and 60s are just an embarrassment to the people who espouse them. And at this stage, it's not even worth debating it. If someone's going to stand up while you're having a conversation about, well, maybe we could socialize this or do this kind of thing, or maybe we could adjust things slightly this way. And if people are going to stand up and immediately start comparing you to Stalin or bring up things like Venezuela or any of these sorts of things, they're idiots. And I'm not really saying that to be dismissive of them, but I am saying that, like, what I am saying is, like, we've looked at that conversation. We've gone through that conversation. We understand that like, the people who are saying it are ignoring, like, the CIA coups. They're ignoring the like, it would be like having a conversation about the state of black ghettos and just denying that slavery existed. Like, this is the level of conversation that we're having with these people now, who are voting conservative. Like, sorry to say, it's just true that there's this knee-jerk, insipid stupidity that really exists in the Conservative Party, that takes any kind of conversation about helping workers and immediately turns it into Red Scare propaganda. And I think this is just me pleading that the Conservative Party expunge that. I think it would be for the best if the Conservatives are interested in helping the populace, which that's a debatable proposition in the first place. I do wish the Conservatives would start actually caring about the electorate. I wish that they would start putting forward more ideas that would actually help the electorate. I take a look at something like the basic income, and I mean, here in Canada, one of the longest, loudest voices is a Conservative senator named Hugh Segal. It's a Conservative idea, in my view, to get something like a basic income passed. It eliminates government bureaucracy. It puts the preference on the individual, but it doesn't deny that the individual lives in sort of a social structure. And this is sort of the funniest part about this failed ideology of individualism, is that Conservatives will speak loudly about hierarchy and how there's this hierarchy and how natural it is and how great it is that there's this hierarchy. And I look at that and I go, well, isn't that just a reframing of society? And if you have a hierarchy that abandons huge segments of people on the bottom, right? Aren't you just knocking out pillars of your hierarchy and ensuring its inevitable collapse? And so if that's what you genuinely believe, that society is not only a hierarchy, but is a hierarchy that, and that's good, then you want to do everything you can to ensure that the pillars of that hierarchy, which is the working class, which is the people who are working at the bottom of that pyramid, should be well taken care of. That they aren't abandoned, that they have reasons to reinvest their time and energy back into the hierarchy. I'm I'm very concerned about the Conservative Party, and I really do feel like it's going to take a complete decimation for them to come around to ideas that include helping common people. One of the big things that is being revealed about this COVID-19 crisis is who is an essential worker. And if at this stage in the game, if you're still standing there saying that, uh, oh, the somebody who's stocking shelves in a grocery store, oh, they should just get a better job. You're stupid. Like, I'm sorry. Like, it's a stupid thing to say. Someone needs to stock those shelves. It's a job that must happen. It's an essential job. The people who do it should be paid well, and they should be able to have a household, live in a stable society, and not worry about it. And if you think otherwise, then you're a stupid person. And I just don't think that there is a way to convince a person who still believes that otherwise. And so I think it is time for people on the left to stop bothering having these debates with stupid people who believe stupid things. I really think it's time for us to start drawing boxes around these people and throwing them in the waste bin of history and say, well, good luck losing elections over and over again with that bigoted opinion. And it is a bigoted opinion that a person who is doing an essential service should not be paid a living wage or is not a respectable member of the society. It's bigotry, and it's economic bigotry. It's just looking at what is necessary work that must happen and denigrating people for doing it while you're benefiting from that labor. That's the big thing. You're 100% benefiting from the fact that the shelves get stocked. You're 100% benefiting from the fact that the areas you live in are cleaned. And yet you turn around and denigrate people for doing it. It's an ideology of hatred that needs to be abolished from our politics and our society. And I don't think you can be a serious or credible person if you're going to stand up and say that a person who's doing an essential and necessary service is deserving of anything less than our absolute respect and economic support. So my hope and my plead here for the Conservative Party is that at the end of it all is I hope they grow up. I hope they grow up and they start taking seriously the absolute necessity it is to treat the people they denigrate with respect. They talk loudly about the hierarchy, but really it's just a method for them to discard people from the conversation. And I don't think it can be supported, and I think that we need to take strong stands against it. And I really think it just does come down to if a person is going to stand up and say, well, that guy's black, so he's an insignificant person. Well, we understand that we can reject an individual that says that. In the same way, I think we should begin treating people the same if they stand up and say, well, that person does this necessary job that has to happen. They're a lesser person for doing it. I think we can treat them the same way. I think that I think racial bigotry and economic bigotry need to start to merge. And we need to take a stronger position on that as leftists. And we need to start laughing at these people if they dare stand up in an intellectual capacity, because it's a laughable proposition. And it's firmly entrenched in just outright stupidity. I would love to vote Conservative in my lifetime. I really would. I would really love it if the Conservative Party actually started caring about the people it claims it wants to govern. My perception of the Conservative Party is that after this batch, like after the Doug Fords and the Kennys and the Pallisters, they're not going to get power again for another 40, 50 years here in Canada. just because they obviously don't care about the populace. And we really do need governors that care about the populace. Anyway, that's the end of me. I hope you guys are having a good time out there. Hug the people you're with. Love the people you're with. Good luck.